My name is Charlotte Morgan. I'm 38. Last week I buried the only person who never abandoned me. Aunt Evelyn wasn't just family, she was my home. I thought that pain would be the hardest part. I was wrong. Because the day after her funeral, my parents, yes, the ones who vanished when I was 13, showed up. With smiles, with suitcases, and with a lawyer. "We're here to support you," they said. But when Mr. Hayes opened the will, their faces turned to ash. If you've ever been betrayed by the people who are supposed to protect you, stay. You need to hear this. I used to believe my childhood was normal, ordinary even. I was 13, living in a modest 2-bedroom apartment in upstate New York with my parents Richard and Diana. We weren't rich, but we had everything we needed. Friday movie nights with takeout pizza, birthday cakes from the local bakery, and quiet weekends at the park. My father worked as a regional sales rep for a hardware company, always on the road but usually home for dinner. My mother taught art part-time at the community centre and kept the house filled with watercolour paintings and homemade candles. We weren't perfect, but I thought we were happy. I ignored the cracks when they first started showing. Dad began staying out later, claiming client dinners and extended road trips. Sometimes he'd return smelling like whiskey and something sharp I couldn't name. I once found a receipt from a casino in Atlantic City in his coat pocket. When I asked, he said it was a business event. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to keep our fragile version of happy intact. My mum started sleeping in more. She'd sit by the window for hours, staring at nothing, her coffee going cold in her hands. She stopped painting. Her smiles came less often, and when they did, they didn't reach her eyes. I found her crying in the bathroom once, muffling sobs into a towel. When I asked what was wrong, she told me not to worry and kissed my forehead like everything was fine. So I tried to be perfect. I got straight A's. I folded laundry without being asked. I never complained about wearing shoes with holes in them or using peanut butter sandwiches as dinner 3 nights a week. I figured if I was good enough, things would go back to the way they were. Then came that October morning. The apartment was too quiet when I woke up. Normally the kettle would whistle by 7:15, followed by my mum's soft humming as she packed lunches. But that morning, nothing. I checked the clock. 8:03. I was late for school. I rushed to the kitchen, half expecting Mum to scold me for oversleeping, but the room was empty. The coffee machine was off. The dish rack was dry. A strange stillness hung in the air. Their bedroom door was open. That was the first real sign something was wrong. Mum always kept it shut on her bad days. I stepped inside slowly. The bed was half made. The closet hung open like a gaping mouth. Half the clothes were gone. The dresser drawers were pulled out, empty but for a few socks and a balled-up t-shirt. Their luggage, usually stuffed under the bed, was missing. I ran back into the kitchen, heart pounding. That's when I saw the note, a single sheet of lined paper resting on the counter beneath the bowl of browning bananas. "Charlotte, we can't do this anymore. Aunt Evelyn will take care of you. We're sorry. No, love Mum and Dad." No explanation. Just 16 words that gutted 13 years of my life. I stood there for a long time, the note trembling in my hands. My first instinct was denial. Maybe there was some emergency. Maybe they'd be back later tonight, apologising, laughing off this horrible misunderstanding. But as the hours passed and the sun set without headlights pulling into the driveway, that hope faded. I called my mum's phone. No answer. I tried my dad's, but the line was already disconnected. I sat by the window with a blanket wrapped around me, eyes fixed on the street. Every car that passed made my heart jolt. Every hour that ticked by felt like confirmation. They were gone. Gone without a goodbye. Gone like I was luggage they could hand off. For 2 days I lived on cereal and tap water, rationing milk like it was gold. I was too scared to tell anyone, too afraid someone would find out I was alone and send me to a foster home. Or worse, an orphanage. I kept the lights off at night, not to save electricity, but to hide. I didn't want the neighbours asking questions. I cleaned the house obsessively, as if a spotless apartment would somehow convince anyone checking in that my life was still normal. I didn't go to school. I ignored the knock from our landlord on the second evening, pretending I wasn't home while he mumbled something about late rent. The phone never rang. The fridge, emptied out. I started sleeping on the couch in the living room, curled in a ball facing the door, just in case. On the third morning, there was another knock. Firm, intentional, not like the landlord's. I stayed silent. Then the lock jiggled. I backed into the corner, clutching a pillow like a shield. The door opened. A woman stepped in, mid-40s, kind eyes, a badge clipped to her blazer. "Charlotte Morgan?" she asked gently. Her voice reminded me of warm laundry and bedtime stories. "I'm with Child Protective Services. My name is Miss Green." I didn't answer. I couldn't move. She knelt, eye level. "You're not in trouble, sweetheart. We're here to help." That was the moment the tears finally came. The dam broke and I cried so hard I couldn't breathe. She let me finish, handed me tissues and sat beside me until the shaking stopped. That afternoon she took me to the local office. I sat in a chair that was too big for me, hugging my knees. Green made a dozen phone calls while I watched a muted cartoon play on the waiting room TV. At one point she stepped out, then came back in smiling, but it was the kind of smile adults used when something wasn't going to be easy. "We've contacted your Aunt Evelyn," she said. "She's on her way. She'll be here by tomorrow morning." Evelyn. I barely remembered her. She was my dad's older sister, I thought. Stern, no nonsense. I'd only seen her once at a Thanksgiving when I was 8. She didn't smile much. My mum said she thought Evelyn looked down on them. "She's too busy playing CEO," my dad had joked once. Why her? Why not a godparent or close friend or literally anyone else? Why did my parents leave me behind like a suitcase and decide Evelyn, who had never sent a birthday card, was now my guardian? The next morning, a black sedan pulled up outside the office. The car was sleek, expensive-looking, its engine humming like a cat. A tall woman stepped out in heels that didn't make a sound. Her silver hair was twisted into a perfect bun. She wore a tailored grey suit and thin leather gloves, even though it wasn't that cold. She looked at me the way people look at clocks, measuring, not admiring. "You're Charlotte," she said. Not a question. "Yes," I replied, barely audible. "I'm Evelyn. Pack what you need. We leave in 10. There was no hug, no "how are you," no apology, just the crisp efficiency of a woman used to being obeyed. Miss Green handed her some paperwork, murmured reassurances, but Evelyn didn't flinch. She nodded once, then turned to me. "Take only what you can carry. The rest can be shipped later." I stuffed clothes into a duffel, grabbed a backpack with my school notebooks and a couple of books. Before we left, I reached into the drawer and tucked the note from my mother into my back pocket, just in case I ever doubted what had happened. We drove in silence for nearly 3 hours. Evelyn didn't ask if I was hungry. She didn't ask if I was okay. But once at a gas station, she handed me a granola bar without looking. That somehow made me feel more seen than anything else in days. In the back seat, I stared out the window and wondered if I'd just been handed off like a package, left behind because I wasn't worth keeping. But beneath the confusion and fear was one stubborn question I couldn't stop thinking. Why Evelyn? The mansion looked like something out of a Jane Austen novel. 3 stories of stone and ivy, with tall windows that blinked in the sunlight like watchful eyes. Black iron gates creaked open as we arrived, revealing a circular driveway lined with trimmed hedges and a marble fountain at the centre. It wasn't just a house, it was a declaration. I followed Evelyn up the grand steps, still clutching my duffel like a lifeline. Inside, the air smelled faintly of lemon polish and old books. The floors were a glossy dark wood, the ceilings impossibly high. A chandelier the size of a small car sparkled above us, casting rainbows on the marble below. "This is your home now," Evelyn said, not pausing to check if I was even listening. A woman with grey curls and a pressed apron greeted us near the stairs. "Mrs. Langley will help you settle in," Evelyn told me, then disappeared down a hallway without another word. Mrs. Langley gave me a soft smile and led me upstairs. "You'll be in the blue room," she said. "It's been prepared." My room was larger than our entire apartment back in the city. The bed had 4 posts and velvet drapes. A writing desk sat by the bay window, looking out over a garden that stretched beyond sight. The closet had more space than I could fill, and the bathroom was tiled in soft green stone. It was beautiful. It was intimidating. It didn't feel like mine. On the dresser, a typed schedule sat beneath a glass paperweight. Weekday routine. Wake up 6:30 a.m. Breakfast, 7 o'clock sharp. Piano practice, 4 o'clock, 5 p.m. Dinner, 6:30 p.m. Homework before screen time. Lights out, 9 p.m. There were more rules on the back: no shoes on hardwood, beds must be made before breakfast, no television on weekdays, dinner conversation must include at least one current event and one personal achievement. Was this a school or a home? The first morning I came down for breakfast at 7:15. Evelyn looked up from her paper, then at the empty chair across from her. Breakfast is at 7, she said. The kitchen is closed. But I'm hungry, I muttered. She didn't repeat herself. I spent the rest of the morning waiting for lunch like it was a rescue boat. I tried testing her. I wore shoes in the hallway. Mrs. Langley asked me, politely, to remove them. I refused. That weekend, Evelyn cancelled my art supplies order and instead handed me a packet on respect and boundaries. I refused to do piano practice. She didn't yell, she didn't plead. She simply cancelled a trip to the museum I'd been looking forward to. It was all so clinical, clean, precise. There was no screaming like my mother used to do, no slammed doors, no passive-aggressive sighs, just action and consequence, like a private court with only one judge. I hated it, and yet it was stable, predictable, even fair. It threw me off balance. I began to keep score in my head. My mother once cried for 2 hours because I didn't brush my hair. Evelyn ignored my messy hair but noticed when I didn't finish my reading assignment. My father used to disappear without explanation. Evelyn kept a visible calendar on the kitchen wall and never missed a single appointment. She wasn't warm, but she never lied, never broke a promise. She followed every rule she expected me to follow. Still, I pushed. I broke curfew by 20 minutes one evening just to see what she'd do. I expected a lecture, maybe punishment. Instead, I found a printed article on teenage sleep studies left on my desk the next morning with a handwritten note. Your body deserves better than this. That was it. No drama, no fight. It made me want to scream. One rainy afternoon, I wandered into the library, more by accident than intention. The storm had knocked out the internet, and with my usual distractions gone, I let curiosity lead me. The room smelled of aged paper and cedar. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined every wall, and an old globe sat near the fireplace. I traced my fingers along the spines, stopping at a row labelled Legal Affairs. Most of the titles were dry: estate law, tax code, business compliance. But one thin folder caught my eye. It was unlabelled. I pulled it down. Inside were scanned newspaper clippings, yellowed with age. The first headline read, Local woman declines adoption offer after tragedy at foster home. My heart jumped. The article was about Evelyn. Years ago, long before I came to live with her, she'd been in talks to adopt a 7-year-old boy from a group home. But 3 days before the final papers were signed, the boy went missing during a supervised outing. His body was never found. According to the article, Evelyn had withdrawn from the process and later gave a rare statement. I am not suited to parenthood. I lack the emotional tools. That quote stuck in my head. So why had she taken me in? That night, I asked Mrs. Langley about the article. She hesitated. That was a hard time for her, she finally said. She blamed herself for something that wasn't her fault. She said she wasn't suited to be a parent, I pressed. Mrs. Langley sighed. And yet here you are. I couldn't stop thinking about it. Was I a charity case, a burden she took on because she was family, not because she wanted to? Maybe she felt guilty. Maybe this was her penance. But then another odd thing happened. I was helping Mrs. Langley organise the attic one weekend, a space full of old trunks and dusty antiques, when I found a locked box labelled Charlotte. My name, written in Evelyn's meticulous handwriting. I didn't open it right away. I stared at it for hours, debating. Finally, I used the tiniest screwdriver from an old tool set to pop it open. Inside were folders, photos, notes, a USB drive. The contents felt intrusive. One folder held printouts from my school reports, grades, behaviour notes, even a copy of my 3rd grade poetry contest win. Another contained letters my mum had written to the school about absences and family matters. There were surveillance-style photos of me walking home from school, eating lunch alone at the park, reading at the library. At first I recoiled. Why had she been watching me? But the more I flipped through, the clearer it became. Evelyn had been monitoring me long before my parents disappeared. Quietly, consistently. She hadn't just taken me in after they left. She had been preparing. I found a note in her handwriting, dated 6 months before my parents vanished. Richard's behaviour worsening. Diana absent from work for 2 weeks. Charlotte seems isolated. Proceed cautiously. It hit me then. She hadn't taken me out of obligation. She had been waiting for the right time, watching to make sure I was truly abandoned. She didn't swoop in like some saviour. She waited until I had no one else. It wasn't neglect, it was strategy. For someone who claimed she lacked the tools for parenting, she had put in more effort than anyone else ever had. I closed the box, returned it carefully, and sat in the attic for a long while, stunned. Something shifted in me that day. Not everything, but something important. She saw me, not just as a responsibility, but as a person. That night at dinner, for the first time since I'd arrived, I volunteered a current event. Evelyn raised an eyebrow, but didn't comment. When I mentioned a quiz I'd aced, she gave a small nod. It wasn't a smile, but it was enough. By the time I turned 15, Evelyn had mapped out my life like a corporate strategy. Piano lessons were no longer just routine, they were a form of discipline. Not about music, but focus. Business language replaced bedtime stories. Sunday evenings were for reviewing quarterly reports from her company, Hughes and Sinclair Homeware. I'd sit at the long dining table, my notes scribbled in the margins of printed Excel sheets, while Evelyn circled profit margins in red ink. At first, I thought it was her way of keeping me occupied. Later, I realised it was training. You need to learn to see the numbers behind the story, she told me one afternoon, sliding a financial statement towards me. Emotion distorts logic. The math tells the truth. It sounded harsh. But there was something empowering about it, reading between the lines of a supply chain report, spotting discrepancies in vendor contracts, learning how to ask questions no one wanted to answer. Evelyn treated me like an intern at first, then like a colleague. She never dumbed things down for me. Still, I often thought of her as mechanical. Her expressions were like frost on glass, beautiful, distant, and hard to see through. She never hugged me, never said, "I love you." Birthdays were acknowledged with elegant envelopes containing neatly folded stationery, handwritten notes about accomplishments and next steps. No balloons, no cake. She wasn't cruel, just calculated, always composed. And for a while I resented it. Then, one winter night, everything changed. We were in her home office, a room I rarely entered without invitation. She'd asked me to find an archived contract for a former supplier, and while digging through old files, I came across a leather folder labelled Personal Correspondence. It was wedged beneath tax documents, probably forgotten. I shouldn't have opened it, but I did. Inside were letters, handwritten, most postmarked from the 1960s and 70s. Some were torn at the edges, others faded almost to illegibility. They were addressed to Evelyn from 2 names I didn't recognise, Walter and Helen Sinclair. The first letter began, "Evelyn, please stop sending money. We don't want your guilt wrapped in cheques." Another, "Your success doesn't erase the shame you brought this family when you refused to stay home and be a lady." The further I read, the more horrified I became. These were her parents. They had disowned her. Because she'd gone to college instead of marrying, because she'd taken a business loan without their permission, because she had embarrassed them by running a company. I read until the words blurred. Then I sat there, folder open on my lap, stunned. I had never seen Evelyn cry, but I imagined she must have once. I quietly replaced the folder, returned to the files, and closed the drawer. Later that night, over dinner, I looked at her differently. Every strict rule, every cool response, it was armour, built from decades of being told she wasn't enough, wasn't wanted. That success didn't earn her love. She'd been trained to believe love was conditional, and maybe in her own strange way. She had tried to teach me the opposite, Not with words, but structure, stability, expectations. We weren't just alike because we'd both been abandoned. We were alike because we survived it by becoming sharp. I didn't say anything that night, but I stayed longer at the table, and when she reminded me about reviewing supplier costs, I didn't roll my eyes. Instead, I said I already did. The freight markup on Region 3 needs renegotiation. For a split second, the corner of her mouth twitched, almost a smile. Evelyn didn't believe in public school. Mediocrity is contagious, she said, one morning as she dropped a crisp brochure on the breakfast table. It was for Westbridge Academy, a private prep school 2 hours away, known for its rigorous academics, elite alumni network and tuition fees that could buy a sports car every semester. I didn't want to go. I liked the rhythm of my current school, even if it was unremarkable. At least there I knew where I stood. Change is uncomfortable, she said, not unkindly, but growth doesn't happen in comfort. So I went. Westbridge was a different universe. The girls wore designer shoes and used phrases like summered in Capri. Their backpacks cost more than my entire wardrobe. I arrived with thrift store sweaters and homemade lunches, immediately branded as an outsider. I didn't speak their language, not socially, not economically, not emotionally. Lunch periods became quiet hours. Group projects became solo missions. I would sit in the library, pretending to study while trying not to cry. The teachers were demanding, the students were cold, and I was drowning. One night, 2 months in, I told Evelyn I wanted to transfer back. I expected resistance. What I didn't expect was her silence. She waited until I was done venting, then said, "You're not going to quit." I slammed my textbook shut. "Why not? I'm miserable." "Because you belong there," she said. "They just haven't realised it yet." "You don't understand," I shot back. Her eyes met mine, calm but firm. "Oh, but I do." I hated her in that moment. I hated her logic, her distance, her refusal to coddle me. I stormed off, locked my bedroom door and cried into my pillow. But the next morning, there was a package on my desk. Inside was a customised planner, colour-coded tabs, and a handwritten schedule Evelyn had prepared just for me. "Efficiency," the note read, "your best weapon." That week, she hired a tutor from the academy, a senior student named Maya, who didn't care about social hierarchy and had a fondness for weird music and green tea. Maya helped me organise my workload and navigate Westbridge's unspoken rules. Evelyn also began driving me halfway each week instead of having me take the bus. She didn't say why, but I noticed she always left a protein bar and a sticky note on the passenger seat, quotes, reminders, or simply, "You're stronger than you feel today." Slowly, things changed. I started answering more in class. My grades climbed. A teacher nominated me for a summer research programme. I even got invited to a study group, nothing major, but it meant I wasn't invisible anymore. By the end of sophomore year, I was in the top 10% of my class. The school offered me a partial scholarship based on academic merit and community involvement. Evelyn never said, "I'm proud of you," but when the acceptance letter arrived, she placed it in a silver frame and set it beside her office lamp. That said enough. Something else shifted too. I found myself seeking her out, not just for homework help or rides, but for advice, for opinions, for quiet dinners where we didn't talk much, but the silence was warm. I began to enjoy her structure, her routines. I even asked for a second piano session each week. And yet deep down, part of me still waited for the day my parents would come back and say, "We made a mistake, we're ready now." Even as I thrived, that tiny hope clung like a shadow. Evelyn never tried to erase them. She didn't throw away their pictures or forbid me from mentioning them. Once she caught me reading an old birthday card from my dad and said, "Missing someone doesn't mean they deserve to be missed." That stuck with me, but I still kept the card. Evelyn passed on a Tuesday morning just before dawn. I was holding her hand when it happened, thin, cool fingers wrapped loosely around mine. She hadn't spoken in 2 days, but I stayed by her bedside anyway, reading aloud from her favourite business memoirs and playing soft piano music from my phone. When her final breath came, it was quiet, unceremonious, like everything else she did, precise and without drama. The hospice nurse placed a hand on my shoulder. "She went peacefully," she said gently. I nodded, unable to speak. I didn't cry at first, there was too much to do. Funeral arrangements, legal notifications, company transitions. Her attorney, Mr. Hayes, called the morning after to confirm the reading of the will. I took notes in a colour-coded notebook, just like she'd taught me. The service was small, exactly as Evelyn had requested. No elaborate floral displays, no eulogy, just classical music playing softly in a stone chapel and a simple black urn at the centre of it all. Most attendees were business associates or former colleagues, people who spoke of her with respect, not warmth. That was Evelyn's way. I wore a navy suit she had gifted me 2 birthdays ago. Always dress for the room you want to command, she used to say. I sat alone in the front row, surrounded by strangers, who admired her but never really knew her. The silence of the ceremony was comforting, until it wasn't. Midway through the final song, I felt a shift in the room. A breeze, maybe, or a tremor in my chest. I turned to glance at the chapel doors and my breath caught. There they were, Richard and Diana Morgan. My parents. My father looked older, thinner hair, heavier frame, suit slightly wrinkled like it had been borrowed. My mother wore oversized sunglasses, though we were indoors, and clutched a tissue to her lips like she was trying to suppress a sob or hide behind it. They walked slowly down the aisle, eyes sweeping the room, then landing on me. My mother gave a small wave. My father nodded like we were acquaintances at a work function. They sat 2 rows behind me. I stared forward, unblinking. The music ended. The officiant offered a final blessing. People began to rise. I remained seated. They approached before I could slip away. "Charlotte," my mother said softly, "you've grown into such a beautiful woman." My father added, "You look just like Evelyn did in her younger days." I didn't respond. We're so sorry for your loss," my mother continued. "We read the obituary and knew we had to come." "To support you," my father said. "Family should be together at a time like this." I opened my mouth, then closed it again. The weight of their presence was too much, like a ghost story you never believed until it stepped into the daylight. "We didn't want to make a scene," my mother whispered. "But we thought maybe after the will is read we could help, ease the burden." I blinked. "What burden?" "Well," my father said, glancing around, "managing this kind of estate, the business, the taxes, it's a lot, for someone your age." My mother nodded sympathetically. "We thought maybe we could assist, as your parents, to help you transition into this new chapter." "Twist the knife, why don't you?" I finally found my voice. "You've been gone 15 years. "We had our reasons," my father said quickly. "But we never stopped thinking about you." "You left a note," I said, my voice low. 16 words, that's all I had. My mother's eyes welled up. "We thought Evelyn would give you a better life." "And now that she's gone," I continued, "you're offering to take her place?" My father raised a hand in mock defence. "We're just saying it might be easier with help. People might try to take advantage of you." I stared at them, cold and quiet. This wasn't a reunion, it was a transaction, and I'd been warned. Before I could respond to their calculated sympathy, a firm voice cut through the tension like a scalpel. "Charlotte," Mr. Hayes said as he approached, his silver-rimmed glasses glinting under the chapel's soft lighting, "I believe we should continue this discussion in a more appropriate setting." He turned to my parents, his posture polite but cool. "The reading of Miss Sinclair's will is scheduled for tomorrow morning. I've made arrangements at my office. You're welcome to attend if Miss Morgan agrees." My father cleared his throat. "Of course, we wouldn't miss it." My mother placed a hand over her chest. "We just want to honour her wishes and be here for Charlotte." Hayes offered a tight smile. "Then let's allow the rest of this service to remain peaceful, shall we?" They nodded, stepping back as if they hadn't just attempted to insert themselves into my future. I stood frozen, unable to react. My body moved only because Hayes gently guided me by the elbow. "Let's get you home," he said. Home. What did that even mean now? The drive back to the mansion passed in a blur. Hayes offered small pieces of legal information, details about probate, a list of Evelyn's assets, the formalities of transfer. But I barely heard them. My hands were clasped tightly in my lap, the knuckles white. When we arrived, the house felt hollow, colder than before. The warmth Evelyn's presence had once given it was gone, replaced by the echo of footsteps and the whisper of expectation. I thanked Hayes and closed the door behind him. The silence was immediate, but not for long. The doorbell rang 10 minutes later. I opened it slowly, already knowing who it was. Richard and Diana stood there, their faces arranged in those same practiced expressions, sympathy, sorrow, and something else beneath it, something sharper. We didn't want to intrude, my mother said, but we thought maybe we could stop by for a short visit. I made a lasagna, she added, holding up a casserole dish wrapped in foil like it was a peace offering. Lasagna. Really? I stepped aside without a word. Part of me wanted to slam the door, but another part, the part raised by Evelyn, knew how to play the long game. They walked in, eyes sweeping over the interior like tourists at a museum. My father paused near the grand staircase, hand grazing the oak banister. This place is impressive, he said. It's beautiful, my mother added. Classic, Evelyn had taste. Their compliments didn't match the way their eyes roved the space. Not with affection, with calculation. They noticed the antique vases, the paintings Evelyn had collected from local artists. My father paused at a portrait of Evelyn in her younger years, her arms crossed, eyes direct, strength in every brushstroke. She really made something of herself, he murmured. My mother wandered towards the parlour, where Evelyn kept her art books and display cases. Her eyes lingered on a small cabinet by the fireplace. Is that original Louis XVI? She asked, feigning casualness. I didn't answer. They moved like they were casing the place. I led them to the dining room, out of habit more than hospitality. They sat across from me at the long table, the same one Evelyn and I had reviewed company reports on. We know this must be hard, my father began, losing someone like her. She gave you so much, my mother said gently. And now, well, it's a lot. The house, the business, the assets. That's a heavy load. My father nodded. And we want to help if you'll let us. There it was again. The offer wrapped in concern, the lie wrapped in love. I kept my expression neutral, like Evelyn had taught me. You're very concerned about the logistics. Well, yes, my father said, leaning forward. We're your parents, Charlotte. We have a right to be. I raised an eyebrow. A right? He backtracked. Not in the legal sense, of course, but emotionally. You're still our daughter. My mother reached across the table, her fingers brushing mine. We missed so much of your life. We thought maybe now we could rebuild something. Her eyes flicked, just for a second, toward the display case behind me, where Evelyn kept her collection of antique jewellery. A flicker, but enough. And suddenly it all crystallised. They weren't here for closure, or for me. They were here for what Evelyn left behind, not her legacy, her possessions. I sat back, folding my arms. You never asked me how I've been. My mother blinked. Well, of course we care. We're just trying not to overwhelm you. My father nodded. There's a time for grief and a time for planning. I stood up. I think we're done here. The will is being read tomorrow. You'll get whatever Evelyn intended. They looked surprised, maybe even insulted. Charlotte, my mother started. I'll see you in Mr. Hayes's office, I said, already walking to the door. As they left, I watched them one last time, their shoulders stiff, their eyes still scanning. Not for memories, for opportunities. They suggested dinner the next night. Just the three of us, my mother had said, her voice warm, practised, a chance to talk without attorneys. I agreed. Evelyn had taught me many things. How to lead a meeting, how to read a balance sheet, how to make silence uncomfortable for people who underestimated me. But the most valuable lesson? Let people talk. They always tell you who they really are if you let the silence stretch long enough. We met at Sorella, a high-end Italian restaurant Evelyn once frequented. I booked the table under my name, chose the spot near the window, visible to staff but quiet enough for conversation. They were already seated when I arrived. My father stood to pull out my chair, his tie slightly askew. My mother wore a pearl necklace I remembered from childhood, as though draping herself in the past would soften the present. The waiter arrived. My father ordered wine, though I declined. Just water for me, I said. I have an early meeting. Small talk followed, strained and artificial. They asked about my work, my responsibilities at the company, the adjustments after Evelyn's passing. You must be exhausted, Aniela. my mother said. Running a business, handling an estate. It's too much for one person. You're doing incredibly well, my father added, which is why we think we might be able to help. There it was. I said nothing, just waited. We've been struggling a bit, my mother continued, eyes wide and moist. We had some medical issues, some bills that piled up. And now with the economy, she reached into her purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper, a medical invoice. This is for a recent round of chemo, she said, placing it in front of me. Stage 2 ovarian cancer. It's manageable, but the treatments aren't cheap. I glanced at the document. It was from a private clinic in Phoenix. Her name was there. The amount due was just over $36,000. We're not asking for much, she said softly. Just enough to get through the next few rounds and to cover some of the debt from earlier treatments. Maybe $100,000, my father chimed in. It's nothing to you now, Charlotte, but to us it would mean everything. I nodded slowly, picking up the paper and slipping it into my handbag. That's a lot, I said neutrally. We'd pay you back, my father said too quickly. Every cent. Of course, my mother added, but what matters more is it would reconnect us, show that family still means something. I smiled politely. Let me think about it. They both exhaled, visibly relieved. My mother reached across the table and squeezed my hand. But I wasn't feeling generous. I was feeling suspicious. Later that night, I dug up an old contact card from Evelyn's files. Dr. Monica Chen, an oncologist Evelyn had once worked with on a corporate healthcare project. She was discreet, smart, and happened to have ties to Phoenix clinics. I called her the next morning. I just have a quick verification question, I said. Have you heard of a patient named Diana Morgan, supposedly being treated for stage 2 ovarian cancer? She asked me to hold. A few minutes later she returned. No record of her here, but I know the clinic on that invoice. I can ask a colleague. 10 minutes later she called me back. There's no Diana Morgan in their patient database, she said. Not even under alias or alternate spellings. I triple-checked. I thanked her and ended the call, my pulse steady, controlled. The next time my phone buzzed, it was a message from my mother. Thinking of you. Thank you again for listening last night. It meant so much. I stared at the screen, then turned it over. Let them believe I was considering it. Let them get comfortable. They'd already told me who they were. Now I needed proof. The voicemail came that evening. I was sorting through Evelyn's documents in the study, nothing unusual, just accounting ledgers and updated inventory lists, when my phone buzzed. The number wasn't saved, but the area code was familiar. Curious, I played the message. Hi, my name is Sandra Kelly. I used to work at First National Bank in Albany with your parents, Richard and Diana Morgan. I saw their names recently linked to Evelyn Sinclair's obituary. I don't know if you'll remember me, but I felt I had to reach out. Please call me back. There are things you should know. I froze. I didn't recognise the name, but something about her voice felt urgent. I called her back 20 minutes later. She answered on the second ring. Thank you for calling, she said quickly, as if worried I might hang up. I wasn't sure you'd believe me, but I couldn't stay quiet. I waited. I worked with your father back in the early 2000s, she began. We were both in personal finance. He had charm, knew how to talk to people. Too much sometimes. Your mother worked as a loan assistant part-time, friendly, persuasive. People trusted her. She hesitated, then continued. There were incidents. A few clients came in saying they'd authorised loans that were larger than expected, or co-signed something they didn't remember signing. The paperwork always looked legitimate, but it wasn't. I felt my stomach turn. Eventually, a small internal investigation began, she said. Your parents left suddenly. No warning. They just vanished one week. Closed accounts, packed up, disappeared. The bank didn't pursue it. Not enough concrete evidence, and it would have been a PR mess. Why are you telling me this now? I asked, trying to keep my voice even. Because I saw your mother's name on a social media post about Evelyn's foundation, and when I realised who you were, well, I remembered how much Evelyn used to visit the bank. She was private, but sharp, the kind of woman who noticed everything, and I figured if they're circling around again, it's not about family. It's about money. After I hung up, I didn't cry. I got up, I went to Evelyn's locked file cabinet, the one in her private study I hadn't yet explored. I used the emergency key she had taped under the bottom drawer. Click. Inside were folders, dozens, neatly labelled, and one caught my eye immediately. Charlotte Morgan. Contingency. My fingers trembled as I pulled it out. Inside were printed emails, notarised statements, legal correspondence. Evelyn had documented everything. There were summaries of phone calls with lawyers, screenshots of messages from people claiming to be concerned relatives, and even receipts, wire transfers, cash withdrawals, and certified cheques. Some were labelled with notes in her unmistakable handwriting. Payment to Richard, 2009, threat of custody interference. Diana, cancer claim, fabricated. Attached to one document was a USB drive. I plugged it into Evelyn's old desktop. There were audio files, recordings. I clicked the first one. A man's voice. My father's. "You've got money, Evelyn. We both know it. All I'm asking is 50 grand. It's not like you can't spare it. Or do you want a legal mess on your hands?" Next file. My mother. "We made mistakes, but Charlotte's still our daughter. If people knew what kind of control freak you were, maybe they'd question whether you're fit to keep her." I played another. My father again. "You want her? Fine. Pay for her. Consider it reimbursement." I covered my mouth, bile rising in my throat. They had tried to sell me, not just once, repeatedly, over years. Evelyn hadn't just taken me in. She had protected me over and over again. She had prepared for this moment. For them. And now, so would I. The next morning, I arrived at Mr. Hayes' office early. Not because I was nervous, those feelings had long since calcified into something colder, but because I wanted the upper hand. Evelyn had taught me that time was a weapon, and showing up before the others sent a message, I was ready. The conference room smelled faintly of leather and lemon oil. The table was long mahogany and far too formal for anything resembling family. I placed my file folder on the table, crisp and thick, filled with every piece of evidence Evelyn had prepared. The audio recordings, financial documents, handwritten notes, even Sandra Kelly's contact information. The USB drive sat on top like a loaded gun. Hayes entered a few minutes later, giving me a respectful nod. "Morning, Charlotte." He glanced at the folder, then at my face. "I see you found the contingency file," I nodded. "And you listened to the recordings?" Another nod. He exhaled, setting down his briefcase. "Good. This will go smoother than I expected." At exactly 10 a.m, the Morgans walked in. My mother wore a muted floral dress, the same one she'd worn to Evelyn's funeral, and clutched a tan purse like it contained her lifeline. My father opted for business casual. Blazer, no tie, and shoes that hadn't been polished in months. Behind them trailed a man in a shiny suit, his hair slicked back with more confidence than credibility. "Gerald Hoffman," he announced, offering Hayes a hand, "representing Mr. and Mrs. Morgan in this matter." Hayes didn't shake it. "Of course, please, sit." They took their seats opposite me. My mother smiled faintly. My father avoided my gaze. Hoffman opened a leather portfolio and cleared his throat. "We understand Miss Sinclair's estate is substantial. Naturally, my clients, being the biological parents of Charlotte, have concerns about her managing such assets without guidance, especially considering their parental rights were never formally terminated." Hayes raised an eyebrow, calm and unreadable. "I'm glad you brought that up." He opened a slim folder and slid several documents across the table. "These are the original guardianship papers from when Evelyn took Charlotte in. As you'll see, after multiple failed attempts to reach Mr. and Mrs. Morgan, including certified letters, published notices and in-person inquiries, a hearing was held in family court." My mother stiffened. "We never received anything." "That's interesting," Hayes said mildly, "because your signatures appear on this affidavit from 2009, consenting to Evelyn's full legal guardianship. Witnessed, notarised, filed." Hoffman leaned over, inspecting the paper. We were told those signatures were forged. Hayes opened another folder. That claim was investigated at the time. Miss Sinclair hired a private investigator to locate you. According to his report, He slid over black and white photographs. Mr. Morgan was seen gambling at multiple casinos. Mrs. Morgan was working under an alias as a cocktail server. When approached directly, both confirmed that they had no interest in resuming custody. My father bristled. That's a violation of privacy. Hayes didn't flinch. You signed a release during the investigator's interview. It's all documented. My mother's voice quivered. But that was years ago. We've changed. We came back to support her. Hayes turned to me. Charlotte, would you like to share what you brought? I opened the folder, removed the USB drive and slid it across the table. Audio files, I said, of them attempting to extort money from Evelyn, multiple times, over more than a decade. Hoffman hesitated. Without confirming authenticity, I must object to... They're time-stamped, I interrupted. Voices matched, locations verified, legal chain of custody intact. Evelyn had this planned better than any of us. Hayes gave a small smile. And here's the final piece. He handed over a sealed envelope. Charlotte was legally adopted by Miss Sinclair at the age of 16. Full rights, court approved, birth certificate amended. The silence was immediate. My father finally spoke. That's not possible. It's public record, Hayes said, adjusting his glasses. You were notified through appropriate legal channels. Your failure to appear did not invalidate the process. My mother looked pale. We didn't know. We would have fought. Which brings us to this. Hayes tapped the table. Per Miss Sinclair's will, if any party attempts to legally challenge the adoption, the inheritance, or Charlotte's sole ownership of the business, he paused. The entire estate, including all assets, will be liquidated and donated to a charitable trust established for abandoned children. Twist. If you contest anything, he continued, you get nothing. Charlotte gets nothing. No one wins. The air shifted. Hoffman leaned towards my parents, whispering rapidly. My father's jaw clenched. My mother's hands trembled. We didn't come here to fight, she said weakly. I stared at them. Two strangers who once shared my DNA, now backed into a corner, not by cruelty, but consequence. Hayes folded his hands. Then I suggest you leave this meeting with the understanding that this matter is settled legally, irrevocably. I said nothing. I didn't need to. Evelyn had already spoken for me. For a moment, no one spoke. The weight of Hayes's words pressed down like a sealed vault. Irrevocable, airtight, final. My mother's lower lip trembled. My father sat back in his chair, arms crossed, jaw grinding side to side. Then the mask cracked. This is ridiculous, my father snapped. You people planned this. Evelyn manipulated the courts, manipulated our daughter. Manipulated, Hayes repeated, arching an eyebrow. You mean the woman who raised Charlotte, paid for her education, covered your debts? She didn't raise her, my mother cut in sharply. She trained her like a little robot. Do you even feel anything, Charlotte? I stayed still, measured. She stole you from us, my father said, fed you lies about us for years, twisted your mind. She documented everything, I replied. She didn't need to twist anything. Your actions spoke for themselves. He pointed at the folder. Anyone can fake documents. Anyone can stage audio. Hayes opened the laptop he'd brought. Let's test that theory. Worry. He clicked a file. My father's voice filled the room, loud and unmistakable. You've got money, Evelyn. We both know it. All I'm asking is 50 grand. It's not like you can't spare it. Or do you want a legal mess on your hands? Another click. My mother. We made mistakes, but Charlotte's still our daughter. If people knew what kind of control freak you were, maybe they'd question whether you're fit to keep her. The room went dead silent. My mother's mouth opened, then shut. My father's face turned a mottled red. Hoffman rubbed his forehead. We were not made aware of this material prior to... because your clients failed to disclose the truth, Hayes said calmly. And now we're done pretending. My mother tried one last angle. She isolated our daughter. She didn't let us near her. Who knows what went on in that house? What if Evelyn mistreated her? That stung. Not because it was true, but because it was desperate and cruel. She was strict, I said. Demanding. She believed in responsibility and earned respect. But she never laid a hand on me. Never made me feel unsafe. Can either of you say the same? They said nothing. She sacrificed everything for me, I continued, voice rising. She documented your threats, your lies, your extortion. You didn't come back to be a family. You came back for the inheritance. We're still your parents, my father snapped. You wouldn't even exist if not for us. Hayes calmly clicked one last file. Evelyn's voice played. If Richard or Diana ever attempt to claim legal rights over Charlotte or challenge her authority, refer to the attached adoption papers and estate clause. Any such action triggers full liquidation of the estate. Let them decide what family means to them. My father slammed his hand on the table. This is a damn setup. No, I said, it's a safeguard, one she put in place because she knew exactly what you were. They rose to leave. My mother made one final attempt, reaching across the table, tears pooling in her eyes. You'll regret this, sweetheart. We just wanted a second chance. I'm not your sweetheart, I said coldly. You had a second chance. It was called my childhood. You walked away from it. You don't understand, she whispered. We were struggling. We thought we were doing what was best. You did what was easiest, I corrected. And now you're doing it again, running, blaming, manipulating. My father sneered. You think money makes you better than us? No, I said. Evelyn's love made me better than you. They moved towards the door. One more thing, I added, my voice sharper now. I don't want further contact. No calls, no emails, no birthday cards pretending you care. We are done. Hayes nodded in agreement. My office will formalise the no-contact order. My mother's face fell, but I didn't care anymore. She had already buried whatever was left between us. I hope you enjoy your millions, my father muttered. I didn't respond. They left. And for the first time since Evelyn died, I felt something close to peace. The house was silent again. But this time it wasn't hollow. It was full of echoes, of intention, of memories carved into walls and routines. Evelyn was gone, yes. But she had left herself behind in the structure of everything she touched. I wandered through the rooms the next morning, letting my fingers brush against the surfaces she once commanded so effortlessly. The polished stair rail, the edge of the dining room table, the grand piano with the keys she never played herself, but made sure I did. In the study, I found a sealed envelope resting atop her favourite ledger. My name was written on it in bold, confident strokes. No flourish, just Charlotte. I opened it with careful hands, expecting instructions, a final business plan, maybe another contingency folder. Instead, it was a letter, written on soft ivory paper in her precise, almost mathematical handwriting. Charlotte, I have never been skilled at expressing affection. My generation wasn't taught to value it in action, only in stoicism. But as I approach the end, I find myself full of things I should have said earlier. You were never a burden, never an obligation. I chose you, not because of duty or guilt, but because when I saw what had been done to you, something shifted inside me. A line broke, and I knew I couldn't look away. You brought noise into a house built on silence. You brought defiance into a life ruled by order. And you brought purpose into a world I had sealed off with rules and routines. I love you, Charlotte. Not as a guardian, not as a caretaker, as my daughter. I reread that line 3 times before the words fully landed. My daughter. She had never said it aloud, never used the word. And yet here on this paper it was clear, unambiguous, permanent. The last paragraph was different. Softer in tone, less structured. There's something I never told you, something I had planned to, but the right moment never came. You weren't the first child I cared for. Years before you, I had a son. My breath caught. His name was Thomas. He lived only a few months. A genetic condition no doctor could explain. He died in my arms before I knew how to be anyone's mother. And I decided then that I never would be. I built a life of structure so I would never feel that helpless again. Then you arrived, and I felt it all again, the fear, the weight. But this time, I didn't run. This time I stayed. I held the letter against my chest, pressing it like it might enter my skin and fill the hollow parts. Later that day, I opened the cedar chest in her bedroom. I had passed it 100 times without curiosity. But something about that letter made me look closer. Inside were things I didn't expect Evelyn Sinclair to keep. My first school ID from Westbridge, A photo of me at a science fair, holding a certificate and looking stunned. A dried flower from my graduation bouquet. Newspaper clippings of my college scholarship announcement. A torn playbill from the first piano recital she ever attended. And at the very bottom a folder labelled Day 1. Inside was a letter I had written her when I first arrived. It was childishly scrawled, filled with uncertainty. I'd written, "I don't know if you like kids. I don't think I'm easy, but thank you for not sending me away." She had kept it all these years. Tucked behind that was a small photo, a baby wrapped in a blue blanket, no name, no caption. But I knew who it was, Thomas. She hadn't erased him, just made room for both of us. That was Evelyn. She didn't bury the pain, she built around it. I sat on her bed for a long time, surrounded by relics of her love, the quiet, unspoken, unshakable kind. And I realised I had spent years searching for something I already had. I had been waiting for someone to return and apologise for leaving, while the person who stayed had been apologising in action every single day. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in my own journal. From this point forward, I wasn't living in Evelyn's legacy. I was building on it. 6 months later, the house no longer felt like Evelyn's. It felt like ours. I hadn't changed much, just softened a few corners, moved some furniture to reflect my own rhythm. The grand piano stayed, though now it held a vase of fresh flowers and the original letter Evelyn wrote me, framed in glass. But her legacy didn't stop at furniture or photo albums. It was bigger than that. It demanded action. The Evelyn Sinclair Foundation launched on what would have been her 72nd birthday. A modest ribbon-cutting ceremony in the back garden marked its beginning. I wore her favourite charcoal grey blazer, not to impersonate her, but to carry her strength with me. The Foundation's mission was simple: support children who'd been abandoned, forgotten, or left behind, not just with shelter, but with structure, with education, mentorship, therapy, and most of all, dignity. The first initiative was a transitional housing programme for teenagers ageing out of the foster care system. The second was a scholarship fund for girls pursuing business, finance, or leadership roles, fields Evelyn had once dominated with elegant precision. And the third, still in development, was a mentorship network pairing successful professionals with youth who'd never had stable guidance. We funded the first year using a portion of Evelyn's estate. I donated more than she outlined in her will, because she would have wanted it that way, not for tax deductions, not for headlines, but because no child should feel what I once felt: forgotten, unworthy, inconvenient. The media caught on quickly. Heiress honours guardian's legacy, the headlines read, from orphan to advocate. But I rejected interviews. I didn't want the focus on my trauma or transformation. I wanted the work to speak louder than any spotlight. It wasn't about me. It was about what she built, and what I was building now. A few weeks after the foundation launched, I returned to her grave. It was early morning. The sun filtered through the tall oaks that lined the cemetery's edge. The black granite headstone stood clean and polished, just as she had specified in her will. Simple, direct, no embellishments. But I'd added one thing. Beneath her name, I had commissioned a new line to be carved: Beloved Mother. The stonecutter had hesitated at first. She wasn't technically, he started, but I interrupted him. She was, in every way that matters. Now, standing there, I ran my fingers over those words. I thought I had to hear it out loud, I said softly. But turns out you didn't need to say it. You lived it. I placed a single white rose on the grass. She'd have hated this, I said aloud, half smiling. Sentimentality was never your thing. But I think deep down you understood its value. You just showed it differently. A breeze swept through the trees as if in answer. I didn't stay long. I never did. She wasn't there, not really. She was in the Foundation's mission statement, in the boardroom where I led strategy meetings with her steadiness in my spine, in the young girls who emailed asking how to get involved. On the drive back home, I thought about family. I used to think it was biology, that blood was thicker, stronger, inevitable, but now I knew better. Family isn't who shares your DNA. Family is who shows up. Family is who stays. It's the one who takes a call at midnight, who teaches you how to file your taxes, who hands you a handkerchief instead of judgment. It's the person who doesn't just feed you, but teaches you to build a life where you never have to beg again. It's not always sweet. It's not always warm. Sometimes family is a woman who doesn't say "I love you" until the very end, but shows it every single day with discipline, loyalty, and relentless presence. That's what Evelyn gave me. And now it's what I give others. To anyone listening, if you've ever been left behind, please know this. You are not the sum of those who abandoned you. You are the product of those who stayed. And sometimes the family we choose saves us more than the one we were born into.